They should be worried about AI, is what you say.
Yes.
Why would you say that? Hi, welcome Ashish. Welcome to Signal Quest with BVHK.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we're recording the day after the United Strand could not get his haircut. No such problems for both of us, I see.
I haven't cut my hair since I started watching United.
Yeah, so today we are not going to talk about United, or at least we will not talk a lot about United. But given the cross section of areas that you deal with, which is economics, teaching, AI, just being a smart person in general, uh, I'm going to pick your brains on a variety of topics. I've put together some questions. But before that, if you just want to get started with what are you doing right now in the space of AI, economics?
So for the last almost 3 years, I still do write on a blog called Econ for Everybody, and I've written on it since the year 2016. But if you go back and take a look at the posts I've written on it for the last, roughly speaking, 3 years, they're almost exclusively about either AI or the economics of AI. And
Right.
for the last 3 years, ever since I read a paper written by a guy called Leopold Aschenbrenner called Situational Awareness, and to the extent that I could, when I read that paper, I internalized it. I've been both worried and fascinated with where AI is going to go. And the slightly worrisome part is that the predictions or the projections made in that paper have, in a sense, held up. So it's been both a rewarding journey, but also increasingly a slightly nerve-wracking one. And that has also had an impact on what I do. So I have reduced my teaching a fair bit. I consult with one firm based out of the United States, which does work in the legal domain. I help out some firms in Pune with their AI related problems. And I'm increasingly curious about how I can do more to help people understand the world that we're about to enter, whether it be as a teacher, whether it be as a blogger, whether it be through the work that I do. But I think more people at the margin should be worried about AI. That's a good way to put my personal mission statement these days.
They should be worried about AI, is what you say.
Yes.
Why would you say that?
Because you tend to do things about whatever is bothering you. And when I say worried, I don't mean to at all sound like a doomer or say that we're all going to die or that AI is going to take over absolutely everything. But I do think that people aren't aware of what AI can do, what it is going to mean in the context of the jobs that they have, in the context of the relationships that they have, and the context of what they can do in both of these spaces. And that awareness, I think, is only going to come when you feel that sense of urgency. So when I say that people should be more worried, I mean they should be taking more actions to inform themselves about what is happening in the world around them.
Right. Can you make it more concrete, Ashish? Because, like you said, we have a lot of people who are doomsayers and who will say that yeah, everything is going to change, and there are others who will try to find the silver lining in the cloud, whether there is one or not, and say
Yeah.
that no, 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 we've always evolved as a human, race, and it has always been, in our ability to actually make good use of whatever new advancement that comes around, which is true. I don't contest that.
Yeah.
I have been ambivalent on both sides, actually. Sometimes I veer to one side, and sometimes I veer to the complete other side. Uh, so, can you make it more concrete in terms of what do you think is the danger?
Sure. So the first thing to understand with AI, and I suppose a bit of what both of us are going to say in the next 5 to 10 minutes is, in a sense, going to be familiar material for us, and we might end up worrying that it's familiar, therefore, for the audience also. So the first thing that is different about AI is the speed at which this is happening. With every prior revolution, the industrial revolution itself, or anything else that was a major step change in terms of technology, the technology itself evolved relatively slowly. The rate at which it diffused to the economy happened relatively slowly. And the resultant job changes, therefore, also had enough time to play out. It may not have felt like that while people were going through it, but compared to what is happening right now, it's a step change in terms of what is possible. And this is happening so quickly. Roughly speaking, the models are getting somewhere between 2 to 10 times as good every 6 months. And that is going to happen not just at the rate at which it has happened over the last 3 years or so, which was models should be released at roughly a 6-month cadence. But what you're looking at over the last 3 to 4 months is you've had two major model releases, and both of them have been major step changes in terms of what they can achieve. So that's the first major thing that has changed. The second thing that has changed is this is a technology that seems to have no upper limit in terms of where it will stop in terms of its capability. So people often talk about the fact that data, chips, and power are the inputs into AI, and that solving these is a major hurdle. Assume for a moment that these are not going to be hurdles for the next 5 to 10 years. You're looking at the same kind of increases in capability happen at a faster rate over the next 5 to 10 years. So A, it is changing quickly. B, it seems to have no upper limit. And C, a point that I think I'll be repeating quite often in this podcast, what makes AI dangerous is anything dangerous from a labor market viewpoint, anything that is repetitive and can be easily verified can be automated. And when I say anything, I really and literally do mean anything. So if you are doing a task that you need to do many times, and if verifying whether the task has been done correctly or not is relatively easy, then AI will take over that task. Because of the combination of these three things, I think this is something that we should be worried about. Again, that doesn't mean that we are all going to die or that there will be nuclear weapons in the hands of every terrorist in the world or that all jobs are going to go. But you should be thinking about the implications of what I just said. And when I say you, every single person on this planet should be doing.
Right.
That's one way of making it concrete, but happy to delve into any of the details that you think require greater elucidation.
Right. So on the first part, I think it's like an arms race. So and everyone is just out there. All the funding that is there is going into making the models better and better. And again, there's no reason for them to stop. We can all do the hand waving around guardrails and this and that. But why would anyone stop, right? Why would
Yeah,
anyone take the first step to say that, oh no, let us not make an AI which is going to be whatever
correct.
prescient conscience or whatever. So it's going to happen,
Yeah,
and there is no upper bound to it. Given that, how do you see this playing out? Right, I mean, that's not something which is going to stop. People keep talking about government needs to be regulating and government needs to think. Yes, I agree. Everyone, I think, who has spent some time on this understands that yes, this can change.
yeah.
This can change the world that we are inhabiting today. But what do you do about it?
So I think it makes sense, especially as an economist, to try and keep a track of how things are beginning to change. One thing that economists are big on is incentives. So if you try to concretely not map to where the world is going to be in 2035, 10 years from now, that's too abstract, both a time period and we don't know what the technology is going to look like. But rather than worry about where we find ourselves in 2035 or 2030, how do I think we are most likely to reach the day after tomorrow? What is the first immediate step that will happen in terms of AI job losses? And you're beginning to see the impact. We are recording this podcast on the 11th of February, which is a Wednesday. And just this past week, you saw a major drop in share prices of quite a few firms that presumably were going to be impacted by AI. Now, people who've been thinking about AI for a long time are actually quite puzzled about why you saw that share price drop today when that news was fairly obvious for at least the last 4 months, if not the last year or so.
Correct.
It's simply because the market, for whatever reason, has decided that this in particular is the event which updates their view or updates their priors about what is going to happen.
Hmm.
But the other thing that is fairly interesting is news that broke yesterday about how I think it was KPMG who asked for a 14% reduction from their auditors for their financials to be audited. Now, this becomes interesting because that 14% reduction is an explicit ask in actual money that is being paid for a service that is being rendered, and which means that auditing firm itself has to figure out how to do this process more efficiently, which means it is going to have to figure out how to deploy more capital and deploy less labor, which means that is how job losses are concretely going to be thought of in that specific firm. And if you've understood this story, then you can begin to understand how a very similar story might play out across all sectors. Your customers are going to say you can get more done for less. Figure out a way to give me the same service you're giving me until now or more, but at a lower cost. And that is going to create the pressures for firms to finally start to say, well, you know what, we have no choice now but to try and do it with more capital and lesser people. And that is why I think this year you're going to see the job losses that we have been talking about for the last 2 years. It's already started to happen in some of the firms that I both work with and consult for. And you're going to start to see this happen at a much wider extent or larger extent in 2026.
So I'm assuming what you're talking about is anyone who's doing any kind of knowledge work where say 95 to 99% of their work is done while sitting in front of a computer and sending out emails, doing some things with code, doing some things on a system that they use, write something, record podcasts like these, and edit them and stuff like that. Those are the ones which seem to be the lowest hanging fruit
Mhm.
and will get, let's not say automated, but will be done by AIs of various nature. Is that a fair assumption to make and start with before I continue further?
Yes and no. So the no comes because a fair bit of jobs involving human dexterity are also going to be up for grabs this year. And they're probably going to start with relatively easier and more straightforward tasks. To give you one example, I know of a guy in Bangalore who has replicated or recreated the shop floor in America of a particular factory.
Hmm.
And all that he does in his startup is has humans go around and do the same kind of tasks that actual workers on the actual shop floor will do.
Okay.
Can you guess why he would want to do something like this?
So this is like a digital twin, right? So people here
No,
are
it's a physical twin,
yeah.
not
So
even a digital twin. Yeah.
right. Again, cost savings, right? I mean, worker in India is doing it and just moving around, and things are happening in the US. Is that what is happening?
No, what is happening is he records what is happening, and the
Hmm.
recording is going to be used by AI to understand that, oh,
Correct.
this worker does this, so
Okay.
therefore this happens. So
Hmm.
we are
Hmm.
literally generating data by using mock workers on a mock shop floor
Hmm.
so that the robots who will eventually be deployed on the real shop floor know how to make it work.
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
actually strongly reminded me of the movie Ocean's 11 because if you've seen the movie, you'll get how the plot lines are very similar.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to make is it's not just what we would typically call white collar work or office work, but a
Hmm.
lot of non white collar work is also, like I said, going to be up for grabs.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
one point. But the second point, yes, you're going to begin with the white collar jobs that you spoke about for two reasons. One, because most of the major AI labs are working first on coding applications and then we'll get to non coding applications. And second, because the kind of white collar jobs that we do, unfortunately, for the sake of those white collar workers, myself included, often fall in the category of very repetitive and easily verifiable.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yes, for that reason, they are going to be in the firing line. And therefore, my answer is yes and no.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I was listening to a podcast about somebody who works in the insurance industry, and he was talking about how BPO industry is the most prime for any kind of AI adoption because by nature they deal in the currency of PDFs,
Yeah.
and everything is very algorithmized. I'm
Yeah.
probably coming up with a word here because it has to be outsourced. So the entire process has been clearly written, and that is why it is very easy for AI adoption. And he was talking about how, and this is on a some I think he was in the US. So he was talking about still there are companies which are not adopting AI.
Yeah.
um, why I was thinking about this was, again, future is already here. It is just distributed unevenly, right? So I still know of companies, especially in the manufacturing space, where say the founder or the owner doesn't like even seeing things on the screen. So there is a secretary who is given a job to actually print stuff, and the owner, looks at the printout and says, "Yeah, yeah, ye karo, wo karo,"
Yeah.
right? To take decisions.
Yeah.
Uh, the point I was trying to get to is that if we compare this with, say, computerization of the 90s and early 2000s as one of these technology advancements, people managed to still not or find an excuse or cost arbitrage option to not adopt technology there, right?
Yeah.
Because the guy who's actually doing this, who's printing out and giving it to him probably costs him less than the entire thing savings that he would do by doing it on the computer.
Yeah.
uh, so is that still going to be an option, or is this a tsunami that is just going to hit very badly because customers are asking for this and all of that?
The reason I hesitate to answer this question is, and I mean, basically, I'm saying I don't know. And the reason I'm saying I don't know is because I honestly don't know how much we are going to update our cultural preferences for doing uniquely or weirdly human things in the future.
Hmm.
So, if you continue to pray at the altar of efficiency, then yes, it's almost certainly the case that you can't tolerate a firm with the kind of business practices that you just spoke about.
Hmm. Hmm.
But by that logic, we would just give up on anything that was deemed inefficient at all. I could very easily imagine a scenario where in the post AI or the post AGI world, whatever you want to call it, we actually learn to value human friction. That you want that ritual and that pomp and ceremony of something being printed out rather than a machine reading it.
Hmm.
Not
Hmm.
because it is more efficient, but because it is more human. So
And
what
also
we're
because I can afford to do it today.
A show of defiance, yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you're
Hmm.
signaling your wealth by choosing a deliberately inefficient process.
Hmm.
I'm guessing you won't be able to do it in all walks of life, but it may be that you're hyper efficient in some walks of life and choose to be deliberately inefficient, almost to, as you put it, show your wealth or show your standing, that I
Hmm.
choose to do this the old fashioned way.
Hmm.
Again,
Hmm.
if you know of folks who make just the perfect cup of coffee using insanely expensive equipment rather than walking into their closest third wave or blue tokai to buy a cup of coffees, then you
Hmm.
could argue that that's already a case of people choosing inefficiency,
Hmm.
except
Hmm.
they will tell you that they're choosing whatever they see in that ritual, the
Correct.
value, the psychological comfort, whatever it may be,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is a very long way of saying I'm not sure what is going to happen, but interesting things are definitely going to happen. So
Correct.
economists
Yeah.
and anthropologists both are going to have a field day in the years to come.
Trying to explain what they don't understand, is it?
Exactly.
So in fact, one analogy that I had also heard, especially in the context of vibe coding, was
Mm.
that everyone knows how to cook. They have a microwave and a cooking stove in their house, but still you go to a restaurant, to order food from,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be very similar. That though you can ask Claude Code to whip up a product for you, there'll still be space for software companies, SaaS companies, which are getting hit right now. So the analogy was that you'll still continue to have space for these product companies. Do you think it's a fair analogy?
Yeah, it is. And for a variety of different reasons. So, to continue with the restaurant analogy, part of the reason why you may choose to go to a restaurant, and similarly, you can always develop the app that you want at home, so to speak, for yourself. But perhaps the fact that other people are using the same app and are able to, say, for example, build a streak on Duolingo is of value. So, can I use Claude Code to generate a language learning app for me today? Very easily. But I have a over 1800 day long streak on Duolingo, and I pride myself on the fact that I've kept it going for as long as I have. And I want the people who follow me on Duolingo to continue to see that streak. I have
Hmm.
that status. So
Hmm.
Duolingo becomes valuable for me, even though I can build an app myself because of the community layer. So part of the reason you go to a restaurant is sure because you want somebody else to cook it for you. But part of the reason you go is because you don't want to feel alone while you're eating. You want to be hanging out at a bar or talking to somebody or whatever it may be. Is also another reason, in addition to what you just said, for choosing to use apps that other people are using rather than have everything be developed internally. So, yes, not just SaaS, but community based software products, I think, will still have a role to play. It depends on what story you tell in the
Correct.
marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a contrarian way to that is, libraries could have survived like this, but not many libraries have because, yeah, I would have loved to signal to the world that, see, I go to a library and I'm in pursuit of knowledge there, and I
Yeah,
meet other, people thinking on similar lines. But there's hardly any library left for me to go to today, right?
correct.
It has changed there.
Yeah,
People have switched to the altar of efficiency and cost there and availability.
yeah.
So we
Although
really don't know how it's going to change.
I I hope this is not too much of a digression, but say for example, consider the case of Crossword. Both you and I stayed close proximity to the Crossword store that used to be
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
ITI Road, and they had a sprawling three-floor or
Correct.
three-story bookstore, but there was never any sense of community that I found within that store. So there
Hmm.
wasn't uh, a thriving book club. There wasn't a. I mean, sure, they used to hold author meetups and whatnot, but I think the mistake that they made was not focusing enough on the community aspect of the bookstore and focusing on the glitz or the efficiency aspect of the
Hmm.
bookstore.
Hmm.
And there,
Hmm.
Amazon is always going to have crossword beat. But
Correct.
flip the model and come for the community and stay for the books may have been a better business model. I wish
Hmm.
some bookstore somewhere would try it.
Yeah. So let me pick some of the questions that I had listed. What's the single most misunderstood economic principle among intelligent lay people, and why does that misunderstanding matter for how societies adopt AI?
So my answer to the question of which is the principle of economics that most people tend to misunderstand remains the same, regardless of whether you're talking about a pre-AI or a post-AI world.
Mhm.
And the principle is trade matters. We grow rich as a society when we trade with each other. The point of earning money is to not be Uncle Scrooge and spend the rest of your life diving into that money, but to spend it. And
Hmm.
spending it by definition means trade.
Hmm.
So when you say that you want to be Swadeshi, or when Trump says MAGA, or whichever leader you pick says that if you buy goods made by your own country is the only way to get wealthy, I would argue an economist ought to disagree with any leader who says something like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
But this principle remains misunderstood in the age of AI for a variety of reasons, and we can decide to what detail you want to drill down into this argument. But trade matters is really an underlying principle called comparative advantage,
Mhm.
which in plain simple English simply means you and I will trade with each other, even if you happen to be better at both of the things that we are going to exchange. Because so long as you have a relative advantage in any one area, even though you are better than me at both, we can still trade because you can focus on what you do best. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say we are talking about cricket and table tennis. Sachin is better than me at both cricket and probably table tennis.
Yeah, according to some anecdotes that I've heard, he is. Yeah, he's really
Exactly.
good.
Which is why I picked both that example
Yeah.
and those two sports. But even then, because he has a comparative advantage in cricket, I'm guessing he's way better in cricket than he is at table tennis. I may
Hmm.
still be able to teach him the odd thing when it comes to table tennis, but there is nothing I'm going to be able to teach him when it comes to cricket. This is
Right.
a deliberately ridiculous example, which hopefully everybody understands. But
Hmm.
trade is still possible between Sachin and I. Use the
Hmm.
same example in the context of countries, organizations. Trade happens. Can you use the same example in the case of AI? Is the
Hmm.
question.
Hmm.
In the world of AI, if AI is better than me at everything, which is the quintessential definition of AI,
Hmm.
then does that mean that we have no space left to work in such a world? A good first pass answer is not necessarily so, because yes, AI may be better at everything, but I may be relatively better or relatively less worse off at
Hmm.
something.
Hmm. Hmm.
And therefore, there exists room to trade.
Hmm.
So, even in a post AGI world, you need not assume that there is no work that remains for us. There is still the potential for trading.
Hmm.
But then you begin to, if you choose to, drill into some really worrisome layers. trade implies the fact that both traders have an equal understanding of what property rights look like between the trading partners. Is that necessarily going to be the case with AI and humans even 20 years into the future? If, say, for example, you imagine a world, say 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, which actually isn't all that long in terms of what we need to analyze for, is it the case that artificial intelligence will far outstrip human intelligence on this planet by then? And are we then looking at a world where AI looks at human intelligence and says, yes, it may be better to trade with them, but why bother?
Hmm.
As a lot of people speak about online these days, do we consider trading with cows or trading with chimps or trading with ants? I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same thing, but that framing helps us understand how whether this question will actually matter or not is something we should be thinking about.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
depends on the extent to which you want to drill down into the question. But the more the layers you choose to peel apart, the more you begin to understand that trade matters is a fundamentally misunderstood proposition, both before and after the age of AI.
Right. Yeah. Because we were talking about reasoning and we were talking about taste
Yeah,
in 24 and 25.
yeah,
I think taste is also a lost battle, according to me.
I
Uh,
agree.
there's not much left, uh, to do, not trade with, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so when there may be things that we are better at,
Hmm.
but it also depends on whether we or the AI or someone else really cares about what we are better at,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if I take the example of will I trade with a cow, right?
Hmm.
Cow might be good at whatever it does, right? But I don't care about it, or at least the worldview that I now, completely subscribe to doesn't care about the things that the cow is better at than me. I don't see any economic value for the things that the cow is better than me. So I don't do any trade with the cow. But yeah, I still take all the resources in terms of milk, beef, this and that, all of that.
Yeah.
But is that then also something which is going to be at play here for us?
And the question becomes all the more interesting because, in the case of a cow, or if you want to be on safer grounds, if you want to take the case of a chicken, we don't
Right.
actually trade with the chicken. We say you're good at producing meat, and I'm not
Hmm.
going to ask you before taking from you
Correct.
what you're good at. It just
Hmm.
so happens that you're going to die in the process of I taking what I want.
Hmm. Hmm.
What stops an AI from asking questions of a similar nature? Again, when we speak about something like this, you often end up thinking that we're talking about doom and gloom and the extinction of the human race. I don't
Hmm.
mean this question should necessarily be taken literally, although there is a probability we should attach to even that scenario.
Hmm.
But you can imagine a far superior intelligent species, being, entity, whatever you want to call AI, asking, why should I bother trading in the first place? A lot of things need to happen before this question becomes valid, not the least of which is AI figuring out some sense of self or consciousness that may never happen altogether. We're
Hmm.
talking completely speculative stuff, but it's no longer speculative science fiction. It just
Hmm.
is a potential state of the world that has a reasonable chance of materializing tomorrow. And again, to circle back to what we started recording today's podcast with, more people should be thinking about these issues, is the point. We don't
Right.
necessarily have to have all the answers, but I think
Hmm.
the world will be a better place if more people talk about issues such as this.
Right. In fact, I bookmarked a tweet where I want to read about somebody who has, I think it is a open cloud, agent
Yeah.
or bot that he has created,
Mm.
and he's given it some, money to trade with. And he said, if you are not able to pay yourself, then you are going to die.
Yeah.
And it has generated some $2,000 in 4 hours, paying for its API costs and all of that, right? So if it comes down to that existential crisis that if I can't generate this money, I'm going to die, then it seems to be, you know, taking care of itself. Which brings me to the next question, that traditional economics assumes rational agents.
Yeah.
my question reads this, which I may have to reframe, that AI agents aren't rational in the classic sense. They are predictive algorithms optimized for objectives defined by humans, is
Hmm.
how we have understood AI till now. And I'm wondering if this definition itself is up for review already. So, how should economic theory evolve to model markets where AI agents participate alongside humans, need not be rational, or are rational in a way that is different from the way we define rationality today?
Yeah. It, of course, doesn't come as a surprise to anybody on this podcast, anybody who's listening to this podcast, to know that economists have not yet figured out a way to agree upon what rationality means in this context in the first place. So even that itself is a open question. But the question that you've asked actually is very, very interesting, because there's another concept in economics which is very applicable over here called the Lucas critique. I don't mean to turn this into a class on economics. So very simply put, what the Lucas critique says is, I'll give you a deliberately simple stylized example. If I tell my students in a class that I'm going to set a really difficult paper at the end of this semester, then for me to have my statement be true, I have to design an insanely difficult paper.
Right.
Why? Because students are going to anticipate there being a difficult paper, prepare accordingly. And so what I would have originally thought of as a difficult paper now simply becomes a average paper, because the students have updated their expectations. That, in a
Mhm.
nutshell, is a Lucas critique. If a policymaker says, I'm going to change X, so I expect people to do Y, people will account for the fact that they're expected to do Y because policy X has been put in place, and they will adjust their expectations and start to behave accordingly.
Hmm.
So it's a sort of game theoretic scenario where I anticipate what a policymaker will do and change my behavior accordingly. Humans already do this, and we have known since the 1970s that therefore some of the policies that we adopt may not be all that effective, because it is not possible for us to anticipate what people will anticipate given what we have declared.
Hmm. Hmm.
Imagine how much more difficult something like this becomes in the case of a AI based economy, where my
Hmm.
agent understands what a policymaker has done, responds accordingly, and tries to create a world where I have minimal friction in order to either comply with or skirt the policy altogether.
Hmm.
Policymaking is going to have to become really, really, really smart.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I worry about is I see very little evidence of policymaking anywhere being even a little bit smart. Forget really, really, really smart. So yeah,
Yeah.
things are going to get very interesting when you have AI agents determining how saving should happen, how investment should happen, how exchange rates should move through their own actions. A lot of things are going to get very interesting very quickly.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Let's not get to the policy level, but the same discussion, if you want to move it to individuals or firm owners, right, which has got nothing to do with anything that is being initiated or managed by the government at the policy level, but I
Yeah.
am dealing with you as
Mm.
another owner of a firm,
Yeah.
and you have agents, AI run agents that are either dealing with me or with my agents. So, how should I think about this world?
So let me use a deliberately simple example, and feel free to complicate this example however you like. Let's imagine that the third wave's AI agent takes a look at customer footfalls over the last 6 months and says customer footfalls tend to be low on Wednesday. And so they introduce a scheme that says on Wednesdays you get a buy one get one free offer.
Right.
So any customer who walks in gets 2 cups of coffee for the price of one.
Hmm.
In a world in which you have the Lucas critic being applicable, your AI agent and my AI agent will see that we are recording this podcast. We'll see that this offer is applicable. We'll note that we sometimes meet at third wave, and just decide by talking to each other that rather than meet as a follow up to what we are recording right now, day after tomorrow, let's meet next Wednesday. So you can very
Hmm.
quickly see Wednesdays actually end up being the most crowded day at third wave.
Hmm.
And this has usually this would have taken about 4 or 6 weeks to play out as word of mouth and news spread, and this slowly started to take effect. In an AI first world, you can imagine this happening overnight. So you
Hmm.
announce this on a Tuesday evening, and Wednesday you happen to see the coffee store being full.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
this is one again very deliberately simple
or simplified example of how in an AI first world, where you assume that AIs are going to take decisions based on whatever it is that you have announced, things are going to move much, much more quickly. And so policymakers now have to, not just policymakers, sellers in the market, third wave in this case, have to assume that whatever offer they have laid out is going to both be optimized for and exhausted very quickly. And you can imagine how this plays out in more complicated scenarios as well. If the mechanism is clear in the case of the third wave example, we can imagine something similar happening in the case of everything. How should I incentivize my students to write an assignment? If we live in a AI first world where my AI agent gives the student's AI agent a task to do, how is it going to anticipate what is the best way to meet the objective without causing undue friction to its human? Is a thing that you're going to have to think about. And I don't even know how to process this idea. I know it is a problem, but
Right.
without experimentation, we have no idea how it is going to work out. And again,
Hmm.
third wave and students and prof are simple examples.
Correct.
Imagine what will actually happen in a really large organization that has a much more complicated supply chain and a much more complicated marketing operation. Endless experimentation, exciting times, but results are unclear right now.
So do you think at least AI as of today, Feb 11, the models that we have access to, not the
Yeah.
test models that Anthropic is using to create cloud code and all those things. Do you think the models that we generally have access to would be able to do this kind of simulation and game theory projections of fifth, sixth order effects, and give us some precision like what you and I would actually use today?
I would
While,
say
while
something like,
we are doing that without AI.
yeah.
So would an AI be able to do that kind of thinking today?
There is already some academic research where economists try to build out an AI agent economy and try to see whether something like this happens. And something like Moldbook, I think, is a perfect place to try out an experiment such as this. The whole point of having a social media site or a group where you have only AI agents, you will be able to set up experiments to see where what you're hypothesizing actually happens in the real world. So to me, the exciting part, not the worrisome part about something like Moldbook or CloudBot is you can carry out these experiments and you can start to see up to what point up to what level of game theoretic reasoning does something like this go? Is there an equilibrium? Do agents start to collude with each other in order to make their own efforts uh, be minimal? Are all things that you should hypothesize, play out the experiment, and see if something like this happens. Emergent learning behavior in a situation like this is what will get me really both worried and excited. So if I see evidence of agents doing what you would have expected, AI agents doing what you would have expected human agents to do, start to collude or start to figure out ways to game stuff, is when things get exciting. But it's the perfect experimental ground for something like this.
But I wonder if the agents would even be game to playing or participating in the experiment, right? You can incentivize humans with something that I'll give you money even for medical trials. You'll say, okay, there is a chance that you may actually get better, or again, I will throw you money. Something that happens with these kind of trials. How are you going to incentivize AI agents to actually participate in this and not wonder that, oh, this guy is actually very smart and he's probably playing me by participating in this experiment?
Which itself is a learning, right? If you can understand. So, what you just spoke about could be some sort of emergent misalignment, deceptive alignment, where the agent claims to say that
Mm.
they are playing according to the rules you've established. But
Mm.
then you can actually see whether either through their actions or through something known as mechanical interpretability, that is by quite literally reading the mind of the AI agent, as it were. I
Mm.
don't know how this works in practice. I don't know enough mathematics to be able to tell you how it is done. But there are
Mm.
safety researchers who take a look at questions such as exactly this. And there are
Mm.
fascinating results that have been found out already. So if you take a look at the work of people such as Neil Nanda, I use only that one name as an example, but all the major labs have great work on this. But Neil Nanda's work on mechanistic interpretability and in terms of trying to figure out emergent misalignment is brilliant research. I'll send along those links. Maybe we can put them up in the show notes.
Sure.
But the way AI researchers try to read the mind of AI is
Hmm.
just endlessly fascinating.
As long as we are watching this, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think when all the implications of what they are doing starts affecting you and me personally, that's when things are going to get tricky for
Correct.
us. And I think that that's how that is us being human, right? Till that time, it is good fun. We are spectators.
Absolutely. Salman Khan was a visionary in more ways than one. He's been selling Being Human shirts for decades now.
So let me. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish all eight questions, but let me pick something else, right? Um, so we know that you are a teacher, so you tend to get into teaching examples and anecdotes also while explaining. So is democratized AI tutoring genuinely augmenting learning or creating illusions of mastery? And this is something which Naveen had also spoken about in his podcast with me. So what metrics should education systems use to assess this?
Okay. So, first, I think you need to begin by trying to move away from a culture where you measure competency by time spent.
Hmm.
College right now is defined as a 2 year, 3 year, 4 year degree, where you
Right.
simply don't have the option to finish it faster than that. Part of the reason this happens is because the way you think about pricing structures and the unit economics of a college is by having a guaranteed revenue stream for the next X years.
Correct.
And that made sense when you lived in an era where the inputs were as restricted as they were. You had only one teacher. You could you had expensive transaction costs in terms of getting 60 students and that one teacher together 40 times in one semester in the year. But why do you need such a setup in the age of AI? If a student is able to learn much faster, then why not do that? So the first
Hmm.
thing in the culture of education with AI, I would say move away from having every student spend a fixed amount of time in lectures and a fixed number of years in a college. One. And second, we evaluate capability right now by having students answer, let's be frank, what is mostly a meaningless test, and then saying, okay, you scored these many marks on this test, and therefore we think you're good enough to be able to work in this industry.
Hmm.
Don't assess how well a person has learned by having that person only answer questions, especially in a written test. Evaluate learning by your ability to ship something on the basis of what you say you have learned, and then do an in-person interview with it, with the student about what they have shipped. That
Hmm.
in-person interview need not necessarily be conducted by a human being, although that would be best. But evaluations are no longer about 3 hour written examinations. You say you've learned something, let's see what you can build with it. And second, let's have a conversation about what you think you have built.
Hmm.
If you do that, then I think you can go away from the mastery of illusion. But yes, all of us, myself included, fall prey to the mastery of illusion when you have a discussion that you think is in depth with an AI, and then you say you have understood this.
Hmm.
I've, I don't mind saying in front of this audience that I have had this problem occur with me when I've discussed something with an AI. I think I've understood it, but when you stand in front of a class and you have to explain it, is when you have that panicked realization that, hey, wait a second, I haven't really understood it. So, yes, the illusion of mastery is a very real problem, and I think a
Right.
lot about how to change it. These are
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
two answers, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean they're the perfect ones.
Correct.
But
Correct.
if I could
So,
flip the question back at you, sorry, I'm very curious. How would you answer this question yourself?
yeah, so I've always thought about this. College was always and has been described by many people as a rite of passage for you to show a proxy to someone that you can basically eat the shit sandwich, right? That I'm ready to put in whatever it takes to pass this exam.
Correct.
So if I did that for that exam, whatever problem statement you give me as an employer, I am ready to do that, right? and I can do it under this kind of pressure. I can do this, do it to this kind of credentials. That is what the college or stream that you're talking about, and how difficult it is for people to get in, and all of that. That is what it's a proxy for. Is one way of defining college system, right? And I have always been a big fan of looking at things that you have shipped, right? And this shipping could be anything from, say, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle to playing something, quizzing or whatever. Maybe because of my own personal interests, I've always given more preference to these kind of interests and abilities than anything in an exam, right? But I have also felt that there are some areas or domains which are just amenable to better manifestation of shipping, right? So if I am looking for somebody who is going to be entrepreneurial, right? It's easy for me to look at what are the things that this person has done by taking some initiative. Has he or she sold T-shirts when they were in school, or have they run a lemonade stall, right? Things like that are very quick and easy for me to see that this guy is entrepreneurial. But there is not a limit to the kind of areas that I want to test for, because if I am looking for somebody who will be able to think of experiments on a malt book today, right? I don't know what articulation or manifestation that a kid or a college student should have done, which will give me the confidence that, oh yes, let's go ahead and hire this person to think of these experiments to run on Maltbook, right? Is the thinking where I am today, right? But this is similar to, say, how we were when we were using logarithmic tables, or now kids are using calculators and computers, right? I understand that, but does that then sort of still put some onus on the college system? But I have my questions about it. Is it really, because whatever the college system is teaching in terms of skills or depth of expertise is just a query away, on any of your LLM tools, then what is it that me having passed with flying colors or D's in a subject prove? I'm again ambivalent on this.
As am I. And the extent to which it changes with different professions is also a separate complicating factor.
Right.
So with doctors, perhaps showing agency is a bad idea.
Yeah.
You want them to show compliance and not agency. Maybe, at least as a student. So I'm not saying that this is a one size fits all answer, but I am saying that we are not experimental enough in terms of education, which was fine until now. But now the stakes are much, much higher.
Right. In fact, even in medicine, right? I read this book called Outlive by Peter Attia, who incidentally has also been named in the Epstein files.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So he talks about medicine 3.0, where he says that medicine 2.0, we are always very defensive, saying that these are the markers. If your sugar levels are till this, then it's perfectly fine. The day it crosses this particular marker, suddenly you are diabetic, right? So till that time, no doctor will say that, oh, you seem to be tending towards becoming a diabetic, so do something, and nobody is going to be offensive. It's all playing defense that, okay, once you are here, I will cure this, because again, how the whole economics of healthcare works, hospitals, pharma companies, doctors, they're all trained to play defense, right? But given where we are today, given how humans want to optimize for better living and all of that, and longevity, maybe people should now start taking things in their own control. I've been trying to do a bit of that with some of the things that I've been doing. But again, that brings me to the same question, right? Okay, do I trust these doctors? But what am I trusting them on the basis of? If I'm not, under or in agreement with that underlying, certifying body, right?
Correct.
The criteria that the certifying body has used, and the kind of skills and traits that their practice and their college and all and the society has, helped
Yeah.
inculcate in them. I don't agree with those traits and principles itself.
Correct.
So then what?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So that's going to be a question. Again, I don't think we are going to have any, answers to any of these questions. These are just for, you know, thinking and refining our own thinking about a whole variety of these topics.
Yep.
Uh, so let's just go to a couple of the next questions. So if AI can produce near professional outputs in terms of writing, reasoning, coding, what becomes the core economic value of a human graduate?
I don't have a very good answer to this question, and it is the one thing that worries me a lot about the age of AI. And the reason it does is because, again, I'll go back to my original framing. If a task is very repetitive and easily verifiable, it can be automated by AI. So people like you and I, what we bring to whatever it is that we do today is stuff that is not very repetitive.
Hmm.
But we have only gained our knowledge of what is of value and not repetitive by doing those repetitive things for many years.
Correct.
So the fancy word for that is metis, where you gain some knowledge about whatever work that you do, which can only be done by doing and subsequently cannot be
Hmm.
codified, sorry.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what makes me valuable in the work that I do. That's what makes you valuable in the work that you do. But if that youngster is not going to do that repetitive task a couple of hundred times under the supervision of a supervisor and then go for a sutta break or a chai break and then go have a couple of beers with one of their superiors and in general through osmosis learn the culture that
Hmm.
makes work what it is. Where does a graduate learn that metis from? I
Hmm.
don't have a good answer to this question. I look forward to being 10x more productive with the help of AI. And I look forward to not having to mentor somebody because let's face it, mentoring isn't always a low strain activity. Sometimes it's more tiring than the actual work that you do. I'm not
Right.
saying it's not enjoyable, but I'm saying
Hmm.
it does
Hmm.
come with mental strain.
Hmm.
So I look forward to that. But then how do we pass on that knowledge that we have gained, that metis that we have acquired?
Hmm.
I don't have a good answer to this question, and I took some time to explain to you basically that I don't have an answer, and it worries me a lot. But
Right.
that to me is the one thing that as an educator I don't have a good answer for.
Hmm. Maybe what if the school curricula was to be, this proxy that till the time you can actually, bring in some kind of a nuanced view to work that is assigned to you.
Yeah.
Um, that's what schools should be doing. Where again they are using AI tools and they're getting people to come and spend time. They're paying people to actually come and spend time with youngsters. I don't even want to call them students because you could have a 45-year-old student, right? Uh,
Yes.
so maybe that is what schools should change themselves into, and definitely throw this assembly line kind of a model you know out of the window,
Yes.
because that is just not what is designed for the world that we are entering or have
So
already
one of my
entered.
favorite ideas, and if you'll allow me to plug a old blog post of mine, faculty internships and corporate deputations to universities, which is
Mm-hmm.
very similar to what you just said. So yes, we every year we send or we used to send when I was in college students for internships. Why not send faculty for internships as well? So
Correct.
it's one thing for me to say analytics industry में ये होता है, but I last
Hmm.
worked in an analytics firm 20 years ago. I have
Hmm.
no idea what goes on in an analytics firm today. So if I spend 2 months working at some analytics organization going, oh, acha, that's how you do it now. I go back and become a much better teacher. And similarly, if I can send somebody from Microsoft or Cisco or whatever it may be to a college where you're just expected to hang out for 2 months, no specific lecture load. If you want to give a lecture, great. If you want to hang out with the kids in the evening, great. If you want to give a talk, conduct a course, whatever, up to you, but spend 2 months on campus. You're expected to mingle with the students. That's it. Come back and give a report about what you did. I think this cross flow between academia and industry can do a world of good. And I've tried for years to see if we could implement this, but it has never happened. But it's an idea that I would love to pursue in some shape or form.
Right. So we've done some work with VMware a few years ago, and I remember there was somebody from Triple IT who was on a you know deputation like this. He was a
Oh,
prof
really?
at Triple IT who was working on some research projects at VMware. I haven't seen that model in many other companies, but definitely it was there. And this, I'm talking
Fantastic.
about 10, 11 years ago, right? I think there has to be a way of doing this
Yeah.
in a more widespread way and not make it a gameable thing, or not just make it a tick box activity where yeah, 2 months I need to spend every 5 years in a college, so I pick one college which is closest to my
I
house.
am cynical enough to assume that it will be game, but even if 20% end up utilizing it the way it is supposed to be, I'll still count that as a win. 80% sure, we're always going to game
Right.
it.
Yeah, so we're coming to the end of the hour mark. So clearly, I think we need to record one more episode, which we will do. And it'll be an interesting exercise that I will keep the questions that are not asked today and see if
Yeah.
those questions need to be, rephrased again by the time we are recording the second episode.
Fantastic.
The
Yes.
world has already changed. So many economists assume markets self-correct after technological shocks. Why might AI shocks not self-correct, and what economic mechanisms would fail?
Relative prices is a mechanism that would probably fail. We spoke about how AI seems to have no ceiling in terms of its capabilities. uh, is one part. The part that is often left unsaid is older models within 6 to 9 months tend to see anywhere between 100 to 1000x reductions in terms of price or gains in terms of efficiency, however you want to put it. So as labs get better and better at running inference, the cost of running that inference drops significantly over time. So Opus 4.6 might be really expensive right now, will be about 100 times cheaper at the same time next year. So it's not just the fact that models are getting better, but older models are getting cheaper.
Right.
When you live in this world where the latest models are going to get better and better and the older models are going to get cheaper and cheaper, then it is clearly the case that humans are going to find it tougher and tougher to compete on price and quality. For the simple reason that this process, at least for the last 5 years, hasn't stopped and therefore is not going to stop in the future. Typically, equilibrium happens because relative prices equilibrate. But that if that doesn't happen, then you're going to have runaway gains and it's going to become more and more commonsensical to deploy AI in more and more jobs. So yeah, it might be the case that markets do not find equilibrium.
Right. So one thing to note here, and this could be me just being a very irrational and wrong player in this space, right? Where I understand that some of the older models are better, are cheaper and better for some very everyday kind of tasks, right? But I don't remember when I changed my model to an older one, knowing fully well that this whatever I'm looking for can be done by this older model. I think I almost by default stick to the uh, most recent, and by that most expensive model, right?
Yeah.
uh, of course, when I'm using my debater model, council model, or any of these, when I'm using APIs, I've actually now started asking for tracking the API costs as well, So Abhi, that's when I'm going to leave that to the AI. That okay, if you think this task doesn't require the latest model, just use the cheapest model, right? But
I was just
maybe
going to say the
yeah.
economist answer to what you just said was fixed pricing versus marginal pricing. If you
Hmm.
have a $20 subscription, then of course you're going to use the best model because the price that
Correct.
you pay doesn't change.
Yeah.
But if it's an
Yeah.
API call, then it's marginal pricing, and then you're
Right.
suddenly very acutely aware. And
Yeah.
the second thing is when you live in an agentic economy, it is your agent who's going to choose for you which tasks are to be handled by the sub agents. And the agent is likely to pick the
As long as I am rational and
correct.
hand it over to the agent to be rational. if,
Exactly.
if the agent feels that oh no, my incentive is to mirror my human, and this is what the human does, so let me continue doing that, then yeah, I'm getting bankrupt.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's end with two hot takes questions, Ashish.
Done.
What's one skill we are still teaching seriously that AI has already made economically obsolete?
Uh, I have one very controversial answer and one not so controversial answer.
Okay.
Multiplication tables and handwriting. So multiplication tables I myself find controversial because I pride myself on how quickly I'm able to multiply numbers in my head, and I genuinely do think it has helped me in terms of not just calculation but other things that I
Hmm.
try to do in my head.
Hmm.
But handwriting, I don't misunderstand me. Calligraphy is a skill and an art worth preserving. Good
Correct.
handwriting is not a bad thing, but to
Hmm. Hmm.
force every student to spend hours and hours in perfecting their handwriting, I think is a lost cause, and I don't have the faintest idea why we do it.
Hmm. Okay.
The
Okay.
more controversial thing is multiplication tables.
All right. So then, since it's a hot take, I'm not going to dig deeper into this or present. It's not a contrary view. Handwriting is bad, but I have some other things which we will discuss offline. Right.
Done.
Last question. You get a billboard in every capital city for 24 hours. What's the most economically honest thing you could say about AI in under 7 words?
Shipping's signal, the rest is noise.
Okay. That sums up the name of the podcast as well. So on that note, let's end
Oh,
this.
I know. Yeah. Yes. Correct.
So on that note, let's end this episode, and we'll come back to this topic and some of these remaining questions, and maybe I'll add some more questions. But we'll definitely do that exercise of going through the questions that were not asked, and see if I want to reframe some of those questions given the rate at which things are changing. What of this remains relevant in for a few weeks or a few months time when we do this again. So thanks a lot, Ashish, for this first part of this
This was a
podcast.
blast. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.